You develop a mode of interpretation for looking at texts. You can also use that mode of interpretation for looking at nature, looking at science.
The alphabet is the atoms of spoken language, because we take spoken words, we break them down into their most basic units, phonemes, which are like the atoms of speech. Well, shortly after the Greeks were writing with an alphabet, they came up with the idea of the atom. So the idea of trying to explain everything in terms of some basic elements is paralleled when you think that you can represent all the words in your language with just 26 letters. This is analysis, taking something complex and breaking it down into its basic units. And this is what you do when you make use of alphabetic script. So there is one connection of science and the alphabet. Another connection, of course, is classification.
The alphabet has another utility aside from its ability to communicate thought and writing, and that is that the alphabet allowed the systemization of information. Can you imagine a library, a dictionary, an encyclopedia without, or an index without the alphabet?
It's one of the remarkable things about the alphabet is that the sequence of letters, the sequence in which we, understand A, B, C, D, E, F, G, remains stable. Now, there isn't always a G, there isn't always an E, and again, the sound values and the reading values attached to those symbols may vary, but the fixed set of symbols is so old that we know it was used in the Sinai Peninsula around 1700 BC in the turquoise mines as a fixed sequence that was used to assemble architectural forms. In other words, you want to build a building and you have a set of bricks or elements that you're shipping somewhere, you use the alphabet and mark them because that sequence is fixed and people will know that's the order in which to assemble those elements.
Using the alphabetical order to systematize and catalog information made not only the communication of information easier, but the retrieval of information. So the problem with ideographic forms of writing like hieroglyphics or the Chinese icons is that there's no good way to systematize information.
So when you put classification together with analysis, you have the basic ingredients for abstract science.
There are many explanations for the rise of early modern science. Capitalism, for example, is undoubtedly part of the story. Mercantilism, new ways of doing the economy, all contributed to the rise of early modern science. But I think that at root is this tradition of reading, a way of reading.
The Renaissance was supported by what Life magazine called the most important invention of the last 1,000 years, which is Gutenberg's printing press in 1453.
The printing press made so much printed material available and inexpensive that then it really was in everybody's interest to learn to read and write.
The printing press was invented in China during the Sung dynasty in about 9 AD. And then a Korean invented metal movable type. So this was long before Gutenberg ever invented this. But the problem is that the Korean and Chinese printers needed to have a bin with an enormous number of blocks for printing because their language was not alphabetized. Gutenberg only needed to set up maybe 26 or 30 bins with the letter A and the letter B and the letter C, and the speed with which they could set up a line of print for the printing press was much faster than any Chinese or Korean printer could do. So it was like this invention that spread printing, which transformed the world.
It's only possible if you have an alphabet. So the alphabet gave rise to the Gutenberg printing press, from which developed the Renaissance, the explosion of knowledge that took place shortly after the invention of the printing press.
Printing spread so rapidly that there were like 8,000 books in the 1450s, and by the end of the century there were 8 million copies. So, I mean, it just made books available to people. And the more books you have, the more incentive there is for people to learn how to read them.